Margaret Maggie Foster had always imagined her retirement years would be quiet. Gentle mornings, with a cup of Earl Grey on the porch, afternoons tending her flower beds, and evenings curled up with a book in her little house in Burlington, Vermont. After working nearly 40 years as an accountant and raising her son Daniel alone after her husband passed, Maggie didn't need much. Peace and simplicity were her luxuries. So when the phone rang late one warm June afternoon and she saw Daniel's name flash across the screen, she smiled before even answering. But the moment she picked up, she could hear it. The fatigue in his voice, the baby's crying in the background, the unspoken plea buried beneath the small talk. "Mom, are you busy?" he asked, his voice tight, low. She chuckled. "I'm retired, sweetheart. What could I possibly be busy with?" Daniel exhaled, like someone who'd been holding his breath too long. "It's Rachel. She's run down. Noah won't sleep. I haven't had a full night in weeks. We're barely holding it together." Behind his words, Maggie heard desperation. And behind the desperation, hope. Hope that she might say yes. Hope that she might come. Noah, their firstborn, was just 3 months old. Maggie had only seen him once, through blurry pixels on a video call. She had wanted to visit after the birth, but Rachel's mother had been staying at the time. Maggie didn't want to overstep. She never wanted to intrude. But now there was space and need. Without hesitation, Maggie said the words Daniel clearly needed to hear. "I'll come tomorrow, first thing." She hung up, her heart full, thrumming with purpose. It had been years since she felt needed in that way. Since her husband passed, the house had grown quieter by the day. Sometimes it felt like the silence itself was pressing in. But now there was something to do, someone to care for. She packed her bag with care, 2 cotton onesies for Noah, breathable and soft for the summer heat, a few bottles of collagen gummies for Rachel, remembering she once said they helped her skin glow, a well-worn copy of a baby care guide from Maggie's own parenting days, and even a lavender-scented baby lotion she'd found on sale. This wasn't a burden, it was a blessing. But her help didn't begin with that phone call. It had started 2 years earlier, quietly, without any announcements. When Daniel and Rachel bought their home in Hartford, Connecticut, they struggled to keep up with the mortgage. Maggie had stepped in, $3,000 every month, pulled from her retirement savings. "Just until you get on your feet," she told them. At first, they were grateful, but as time passed, the gratitude faded. The transfer became expected. No more thank you notes, no more updates, just the assumption that Maggie would continue giving. Still, she didn't mind. Or at least, she told herself she didn't. Parents help their children. That's what they do. And what else was her savings for, if not to ease the path for the boys she raised through scraped knees, college applications, and heartbreaks? But deep inside, somewhere quiet and ignored, she longed for more than just transactions. She wanted to be part of something again, to hold her grandson without having to schedule a visit, to feel welcome in their home, not just useful, to be invited, not tolerated. As she zipped her suitcase and laid it by the front door, Maggie let herself imagine what the next few weeks might look like. Rocking baby Noah to sleep, Rachel opening up over coffee, Daniel laughing again the way he used to. She imagined dinners with stories, a family united, not perfect, but connected. And maybe, just maybe, she'd find her place again. Not just as a helper or a bank account, but as Mom, as Grandma Maggie. Of course, she had no idea that this trip would change everything, that the warmth she carried in her heart would be met with cold stares, curt words, and a couch instead of a bed. That her years of silent giving would be taken for granted. That something deep inside her would finally reach its limit. But for now, Maggie didn't know any of that. All she knew was that her son had asked for help. And like she had done his whole life, without question, without hesitation, she answered the call. The moment Maggie stepped off the bus in Hartford, Connecticut, a wave of humid summer heat clung to her like a second skin. She tugged her suitcase across the cracked sidewalk and shifted the gift bag in her arm, trying not to crush the neatly packed onesies and collagen gummies inside. Daniel opened the front door before she even reached the porch. His face lit up. Tired, yes, but genuinely glad to see her. "Mom, you made it. Let me get your bag." As he took it from her, Maggie peeked inside the house. The scent hit her first, formula, diapers, and something faintly sour, like damp laundry forgotten in the washer. The living room was tidy enough, but it was the kind of clean that screamed bare minimum, the kind born from sheer survival, not intention. From the hallway, Rachel emerged holding baby Noah. Her hair was tied up in a loose bun, her face pale, the deep circles under her eyes making her look older than her 31 years. She gave a short nod and said flatly, "Hi, Maggie. You're here." No warmth, no smile. Just words, offered like an obligation. Still, Maggie smiled through it. "I brought you some collagen gummies," she said, holding out the gift bag, "and a few little things for Noah." Rachel took the bag without a glance and turned back down the hallway. The bedroom door shut quietly behind her. Maggie stood in the entryway, her hands still midair where the bag had been. The moment hung heavy until Daniel cleared his throat and gave her a sheepish grin. "So, about where you'll sleep?" He scratched the back of his neck and gestured toward the couch. "That little guest room's still full of baby stuff. Old crib, boxes from the shower, clutter. I'll clear it out this weekend." Maggie looked at the couch. Grey fabric, a little lumpy, no privacy. Her heart sank just a bit, but she forced a smile. "That's fine. I don't need much. I'm just one person." Relief washed over Daniel's face like someone had just lifted a weight off his shoulders. "Thanks, Mom. I'll get you some water." He disappeared into the kitchen, and Maggie eased herself down onto the couch, brushing her palm over the coarse fabric. It wasn't the lack of a room that stung, it was the implication. The couch wasn't an oversight, it was a symbol. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't even a grandmother visiting her first grandchild. She was help. The first night confirmed it. Maggie barely slept. The air was thick with humidity. The screen on the sliding door let mosquitoes in like invitations. By 2 a.m., her arms and legs were covered in itchy red welts. Every shift on the couch made the springs creak like a haunted rocking chair, and through the thin wall, she could hear Noah crying, Daniel snoring, and Rachel sighing. By sunrise, Maggie had already gotten up, tiptoed into the hallway, and offered help. Rachel, standing bleary-eyed in the nursery, didn't say thank you, didn't smile, just muttered, "He's hungry," and turned away. From that point forward, Maggie was unofficially on duty. She burped Noah, changed his diapers, rocked him endlessly, cleaned bottles, hand-washed laundry, mopped the kitchen floor. Daniel went to work early and came back late. Rachel mostly stayed in the bedroom, scrolling her phone, only coming out to give instructions. "Don't put his clothes in the washer, hand wash only. The bottles need to be sterilized every time. The floor's getting dusty. Can you give it a quick mop?" The words weren't cruel, but they were cold, mechanical, like Maggie was the housekeeper, not the woman who raised the man paying the mortgage. And then came mealtime. Rachel cooked once or twice. The food was bold, spicy, heavy, full of garlic and jalapeno. For Maggie, who had developed a sensitive stomach in recent years, it was a gamble. One evening, after forcing down 2 forkfuls of pasta swimming in red pepper flakes, Maggie cleared her throat and said gently, "Rachel, would it be okay to have something milder next time? Maybe a simple soup?" Rachel didn't even look up from her phone. "I'm exhausted from taking care of the baby. I don't have the energy to make 2 separate meals. If it doesn't work for you, you can eat out." Just like that. The message was clear. "You're lucky we're feeding you at all." Maggie said nothing. That night, she lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the fan buzzing above her like a cheap apology. Her back ached, her legs itched, her stomach churned from dinner, and worse than all of that, she felt invisible. She hadn't come for luxury, she hadn't come for comfort, she had come for connection. But in this house, she wasn't Mom, she wasn't Grandma, she was just Chloe, unpaid, unacknowledged, unseen. It was the third afternoon, and the heat inside the house had become unbearable. The air hung thick and unmoving, as if the whole world had decided to stop breathing. Maggie could feel sweat rolling down her back, soaking into her shirt like warm syrup. The ceiling fan did little more than push the hot air around. Outside, even the leaves on the trees looked too tired to rustle. Baby Noah had been fussing for hours, his cheeks flushed, tiny body radiating warmth like a fevered kettle. Maggie had tried everything, rocking him, feeding him, whispering lullabies she hadn't sung in decades. But he kept crying, squirming, his face beet red and sticky with sweat. She looked at the old wall-mounted air conditioner in the corner of the living room. Dust had collected along the vents, but the power light still glowed faintly. She hesitated. She hadn't seen it on once since arriving. Maybe they were trying to save money. Maybe it didn't even work. But Noah was struggling, and her instincts took over. Maggie picked up the remote, aimed it at the unit, and pressed the power button. A low hum rumbled from the machine, followed by a slow stream of cool air. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Within minutes, Noah calmed. His cries softened to whimpers, then to soft sighs. His little eyelids drooped. One tiny hand curled into the fabric of Maggie's blouse. Relief swept through her like a breeze of its own. She sat down carefully on the edge of the couch, still bouncing him gently, finally able to take a breath herself. The moment felt small but sacred, like the kind of peace that only comes after hours of chaos. And then, like a switch being flipped, it ended. The bedroom door flung open and Rachel stormed out. Her eyes were sharp, her mouth tight. She marched straight across the room without a word and slammed the power button on the AC remote. The hum died. The air turned thick again, all in a single heartbeat. Rachel didn't look at Maggie. She stared at the machine, like it had personally betrayed her. "Do you have any idea how much electricity that thing eats up in an hour?" she snapped. "Formula, diapers, the mortgage. We're drowning. We don't need to be throwing money away on air conditioning all day." Her tone wasn't a request. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a reprimand, cold and cutting. Maggie stood there, still holding Noah, stunned. She didn't speak, couldn't. It wasn't just the sharpness of Rachel's words, it was what they meant. Maggie hadn't turned on the AC for herself. She hadn't done it to be comfortable. She'd done it for the baby, for Rachel's son, for their child who had been overheating, restless, miserable. And for that, she was being scolded like a careless maid. Her ears rang. Her heart thudded in her chest, not in fear, but in disbelief. There was a moment, suspended in the thick, stale air, when Maggie felt something shift inside her, something long held and sacred, the belief that her love, her effort, her willingness to show up without being asked, would be recognized. That something cracked. Rachel didn't wait for a reply. She turned and disappeared back into the bedroom, closing the door behind her with a final, dismissive click. Maggie remained still, Noah now fidgeting slightly in her arms, the coolness already fading from the air. The silence in the room pressed down hard. The humiliation was not loud. It was quiet, heavy, dense, like fog creeping into her lungs. She didn't cry. Not then. She wouldn't give that to the walls. Instead, she walked to the sliding glass door and opened it just a crack, hoping for a breeze that never came. Then she sat down again, picked up the handheld fan, and resumed fanning slowly back and forth, back and forth. Noah eventually fell asleep again, his breathing soft and even. But Maggie's mind was anything but still. What had she done to deserve this? She wasn't asking for praise or a medal. She didn't need a parade for changing diapers or rocking a baby. But to be silenced like that, to be reprimanded for doing something kind, something necessary, cut deeper than she could have expected. 3 days. 3 days of sleeping on a sagging couch, covered in mosquito bites, eating food that upset her stomach, following instructions barked like orders, and being thanked for none of it. 3 days of giving everything she had left in her aching body, only to be told she'd done too much. But it wasn't just the heat that had been smothering her. It was the realization that in this house, her love was seen as a resource. Not a gift, not a bond, just something convenient until it cost too much. That night, long after Daniel came home and said nothing about the AC, Maggie lay awake again on the couch, sweat soaking through her clothes, her back sore, her spirit hollowed out. And in the stillness, without any drama or declaration, she made a decision. Something had to change, not because she was angry, but because she was finally, undeniably, done pretending this was love. By the next morning, the decision had fully taken root. Not loud, not dramatic, but firm. Maggie had spent the night turning it over in her mind, not out of doubt, but for the simple fact that something that big, something that final, deserved a quiet goodbye. The sun hadn't even risen when she packed her things. There wasn't much, a few changes of clothes, her book, the toiletries she always carried in a small floral bag. She left everything she'd brought for Noah behind, the onesies, the baby lotion, the spare diapers. She didn't want anything that was meant for him to come back with her. Whatever else had happened, he was still innocent, still her grandson. Daniel stumbled into the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "You're up early," he mumbled. Then he noticed the packed suitcase. "Wait, are you leaving?" Maggie gave a soft smile, the kind that says everything while trying not to say too much. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm heading back to Vermont this morning." Daniel blinked. "So soon? I thought you were staying for a couple of weeks." "I know," she said gently. "But something came up back home. And besides, it seems like you and Rachel have things under control now." He stared at her, uncertain, maybe even confused. "Is this about the AC thing?" he asked slowly. "Did Rachel say something?" Maggie shook her head. "Daniel, this isn't about any one thing. I have my own life too, and there are things I need to take care of." He didn't argue. Not really. He looked like he wanted to, but the words didn't come. Instead, he helped carry her suitcase to the car. The drive to the bus station was mostly quiet, an awkward silence that stretched like rubber, too tight and close to snapping. When they arrived, Daniel reached into his wallet and pulled out 2 crisp $100 bills. "Here," he said, holding them out to her, eyes unsure. "I know things weren't perfect while you were here. Rachel's just overwhelmed. I know she came off rough. She's not sleeping. She didn't mean to be harsh." Maggie looked at the money, then at her son. Her boy, now a man, still grasping for a way to fix something with dollars. She gently pushed his hand back. "I don't need that, Daniel. Really, you keep it. You'll need it more than I will." He didn't push, just folded the bills back into his wallet and stared at the dashboard. "I'll clean out the guest room this weekend," he said quietly. "Get you a real bed. Maybe next time." Maggie offered a soft nod. "We'll see." When the bus rolled into the station, she hugged him, short, familiar, still full of love, and then stepped aboard without looking back. The ride home was long, but peaceful. She watched the scenery blur by through the window. Rolling hills, gas stations, small towns she didn't know the names of. For the first time in days, her body began to unclench. Her chest loosened. Her jaw softened. It wasn't just the distance. It was clarity. She'd been telling herself for years that giving was love, that sacrifice proved worth. But now, sitting on that bus with her hands folded calmly in her lap, she realized something simple and profound. Love should never make you invisible. When Maggie got home, she opened the front door and was met with the gentle hush of her own space. The hardwood floors glowed in the morning light. The scent of fresh laundry still lingered in the air. She walked straight into her bedroom and collapsed onto her mattress, not just tired, but drained in a way she hadn't felt since her husband died. For a while, she just lay there, face down, breathing in the familiar. Then she rolled over and looked up at the photo on her nightstand, a picture of her and her late husband on their 30th anniversary. He was grinning, arms wrapped around her, eyes squinting in the sun. She whispered to him in her heart, "I did my best. I really did." Later that afternoon, she sat on her couch with her tablet in her lap and opened her banking app. It was almost the end of the month, the day she always sent the $3,000 to Daniel and Rachel's mortgage account. Her finger hovered over the transfer button. For a long time, she just sat there. Then she closed the app. She opened a travel site instead, looked at short trips along the Maine coast, checked the community college catalog for beginner pottery classes. Then, smiling faintly, she made a new kind of decision. From now on, that money wasn't going toward a mortgage she didn't live under. It was going toward her. Not to punish anyone, but to finally care for the one person she'd ignored for far too long, herself. 3 days passed before Maggie's phone rang again. She had spent the morning watering the plants on her balcony, letting the summer sun warm her shoulders. Her lavender was blooming again, and a tiny hummingbird had zipped by earlier, dipping into her petunias. For the first time in a long while, Maggie felt grounded, like the life she was living finally belonged to her. Then the screen lit up with an unfamiliar number. She answered cautiously. "Hi, Maggie. It's Carol, from the community center." Carol's voice was soft, careful, the kind of careful that never meant good news. "Is everything okay?" Maggie asked, gently setting down her watering can. "Well, I thought you should know. Rachel stopped by the rec center yesterday. She seemed upset. She said, you cut them off financially, that you called her a freeloader, that you told her you'd rather give your money to a stray dog than help her again." Maggie closed her eyes. "I didn't say that," she said quietly. Carol sighed. "I figured, but she's been telling others too. At the library, the co-op, church, it's starting to spread." Maggie thanked her and hung up. Her hands, steadied just minutes ago, now trembled slightly as she turned off the hose. By afternoon, it was impossible to ignore. In the local community Facebook group, Sunnybrook Neighbors United, a post had gone up. Rachel had shared a screenshot of a private message Maggie had once sent to a close friend. Someone she now realized hadn't kept it private. It read, "Sometimes dogs are kinder than people. At least they know how to be grateful." Rachel's caption beneath the screenshot read, "Some people think I'm a dog, apparently." The post was exploding with reactions. Comments poured in, some expressing shock, some sympathy, some disguised judgment. Maggie didn't respond. She didn't post a rebuttal. She didn't defend herself. What would be the point? And then, as if to twist the knife, Maggie stumbled across a second post, one of the tiny cotton onesies she'd picked out for Noah, listed on a resale site. Brand new, never worn. Too outdated. Message if interested. There was no mention of who had given them. No thanks, just discarded like clearance rack clutter. She sat in silence for a long time, phone resting on her lap like a stone. The next day, it got worse. Outside the grocery store, she saw Rachel. They locked eyes by the banana stand. Rachel pushed her cart toward Maggie, baby Noah strapped to her chest in a soft carrier. Her voice was low but sharp, slicing through the air with practiced bitterness. "Well, are you happy now?" she hissed. "Everyone in the neighborhood is talking. I get side-eyed at the pharmacy, the post office. You've really stirred the pot." Maggie didn't respond. She reached for a bundle of grapes. Rachel stepped closer, voice hardening. "You think it's funny? Painting me like some gold-digging brat? Making me look like a bad mom?" Still, Maggie said nothing. She chose a ripe avocado, inspecting it slowly. And then Rachel leaned in closer, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Aren't you even a little scared that someday Noah will find out what kind of grandmother you really were?" That did it. Maggie looked up, slowly, deliberately, and met Rachel's gaze. "No," she said calmly, "but I do worry that someday Noah will find out how his mother treated the woman who held him through the night while she slept through the afternoon." Rachel's face went pale. Maggie didn't wait for a response. She turned her cart and walked away, her steps unhurried, her heart strangely steady. That evening, Maggie brewed herself a cup of chamomile tea, drew a basin of warm water for a foot soak, and turned on the soft jazz station she hadn't listened to in months. The steam rose gently. The house was still, untouched by the noise of recent days. Her phone buzzed, a text from Daniel. "Mom, I'm sorry." I know Rachel went too far this time. Maggie read the words but didn't reply, not because she was angry, but because it was too late. The apology wasn't a conversation. It was a convenience, a reflex, not a reckoning. In the following days, the silence returned. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy kind. The kind that stretches across burned bridges. Neighbors grew distant. Conversations stopped when Maggie walked into the bakery. People who had once smiled now looked down at their phones. She let it be. Let them think what they wanted. She had nothing to prove to anyone anymore. Because the truth, the real truth, was simple. She had offered love, given time, given money, given herself. And now, finally, she was choosing to keep something for herself. Dignity. It was a quiet afternoon in Burlington when Maggie's phone rang again. She had just returned from her beginner pottery class, hands still damp with clay. Her very first piece, a small lopsided teacup, sat drying near the window, oddly beautiful in its imperfection. She didn't recognize the number. "Mom, it's me." Daniel's voice came through the line, panicked, ragged, and barely holding together. "It's Noah. He's got a fever. 102.4. He's not responding. He's just limp. I've been calling clinics, but there are no appointments. Rachel's not picking up. I don't know where she is. I don't know what to do." For a second, Maggie couldn't speak. Then instinct took over. "Which hospital?" she asked, already grabbing her purse. "St. Joseph's, emergency wing." "I'll be there." She didn't think about the past. She didn't revisit the AC, the couch, the gossip, the onesie on resale. None of it mattered now, not when her grandson needed her. By the time she arrived at the hospital, the pediatric ER was in full chaos. Children crying, nurses rushing, parents pacing in fear. And there, near the triage desk, was Daniel, sweat-soaked, slumped in a plastic chair, holding Noah against his chest. The baby's cheeks were flushed, eyelids heavy, skin burning. Maggie knelt without a word and took Noah gently into her arms. His tiny fingers curled around the collar of her blouse, searching. His breath was shallow. Too shallow. "I've got you, sweetheart," she whispered. "Grandma's here." Daniel sat beside her, eyes rimmed red, voice cracked from exhaustion. He wouldn't wake up properly this morning, just kept whining, then stopped crying altogether. "I thought it was just a cold." Rachel said he was teething. Maggie looked down at the child in her arms, then at her son. "You left him like this for 3 days?" she asked, quiet but firm. Daniel dropped his head into his hands. "I didn't know. I didn't know it was this bad." She didn't yell. She didn't shame him. There was nothing left to say that would be louder than the silence between them. Later that night, after Noah had been admitted and finally stabilized, Maggie remained by his bedside. The fever had broken. His breathing had returned to something closer to normal. One of his hands stayed wrapped around her pinky as he slept. Daniel had fallen asleep in the chair. At 2:17 a.m., Maggie's phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was an email from Rachel. The subject line was blank, the message scattered and raw. Maggie, I know I've been terrible. I lied about what you said. I sold the baby clothes you gave us. I complained behind your back. I pushed you out and then blamed you for stepping away. I'm not a good mom. I haven't been a good wife. And I was never a decent daughter-in-law. I'm sorry. Not because Noah is sick, but because I finally get it now. I see what you were trying to give us. I'm sorry I called it a burden. Attached was a photo, an old snapshot Maggie had completely forgotten about. It was her and Rachel, back when Rachel was newly pregnant, both covered in flour, laughing in the kitchen after trying to bake cookies together. It had been a good moment, real. Maggie stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly set the phone down without replying. The next morning, Daniel stirred awake, rubbed his face, and looked at his mother. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm sorry. For everything. I should have stood up. I should have seen what was happening. I just didn't know how." Maggie looked at him, really looked at him. Not as a boy anymore, not even as the man who disappointed her, but as someone trying, someone flawed. "I know," she said. "Now you do." In the weeks that followed, something shifted. Daniel and Rachel didn't ask Maggie to move back in. They didn't beg for help with money. Instead, they started sending short, humble texts. "Does this look like a rash? Should we alternate Tylenol and Motrin? How did you get him to nap so easily?" Maggie always responded, but never right away, not out of punishment, but because they needed to learn, needed to try first. Rachel began sending brief messages too, less clipped, still not warm, but softer, a small shift, a start. Maggie didn't rush to forgive. She didn't pretend nothing had happened, but she did plant new lavender on the balcony. She did book that weekend trip to the Maine coast. And she did return to her pottery class, letting her hands learn how to shape softness into something solid. One late afternoon, as sunlight pooled across her living room floor, Maggie curled up on her own couch, with a cup of tea, her phone silenced, and no need to answer to anyone. For the first time in her life, she wasn't waiting for someone to need her, and in that stillness she found something rare and whole. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, but peace. Maggie's journey isn't just about a mother who was mistreated by her son and daughter-in-law. It's about something deeper and more universally human. Learning when love becomes obligation, and when giving becomes erasure. For many older adults, especially those who have spent their lives caring for others, there comes a time when you ask, do they still see me? Or just what I do for them? Maggie, like so many, believed that love meant sacrifice. That to be a good parent was to keep showing up, no matter the cost. But what she learned, and what this story gently teaches us, is that love without respect becomes imbalance, and giving without boundaries becomes exploitation. The power of Maggie's decision to step back wasn't in the anger, it was in the clarity. She didn't lash out, she didn't demand repayment, she simply said, "Enough," and reclaimed her right to rest, to peace, and to dignity. That quiet strength is something many elders understand well, because life has taught them that peace isn't handed out, it's earned by choosing yourself, sometimes after years of choosing others. Maggie's story also reminds us that it's never too late to begin again. Whether it's signing up for a pottery class, planning a trip, or just sleeping through the night on your own terms, self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. And more than that, it's healing. And finally, the story shows that sometimes it takes losing comfort to gain perspective. Only when her grandson fell ill did her son and daughter-in-law truly understand the depth of Maggie's love, not because she was loud about it, but because real love speaks loudest through presence, not pressure. To anyone who's ever felt used, overlooked, or taken for granted, Maggie's story is a soft but powerful reminder. You are not here to be everyone's solution. You are here to live a life that feels like your own.